are live. Welcome back to my channel with Mishka and I. Feeling very playful today. I was thinking of doing or just telling you a bit more about what the process was like and how it's just been to adopt a dog here in Portugal, from a sort of like process standpoint, how easy it was, etc., but also from like an emotional standpoint, like what it was like to train her, to like in a foreign country, like what language does she speak, you know, and just like what it was like to just integrate her into my life and how much my life has changed since adopting her. For those of you who know, I was very nomadic for about 9 years of my life. Every 6 to 9 months I would like move countries, like just a whole life in 2 suitcases basically, or 2 backpacks more like. I was actually more of a backpacker, and since getting her I've just been way more settled and less flighty, less fleeting, and it's actually changed a lot for me in terms of my personal life and also in terms of my business, which has been quite interesting, and I'll definitely expand a little bit more on that part as well. And that was probably the most surprising thing that came out of this was how much more settled and grounded and safe I felt in my business when I had more stability and groundedness and routine in my personal life. Because of her, walking her every day. And so yeah, I'm going to dive a little bit more into each of that now. So what was it like to adopt this beautiful soul right here? So it started about a year ago, when I bumped into somebody at a cafe here in Lisbon, and she told me that she volunteers at like an animal shelter, and they're always looking for dog walkers, or people just like come in and love on the dogs. And I said to myself, I was like, oh, that's perfect, because you know, no strings attached, there's no commitment, I can kind of just go whenever I want to, or you know, be in nature and surround myself with dogs. I'm like, oh, this is perfect, like, can I come join you sometime? And so she said, yes, of course, I'm going next Saturday if you want to come. And I said, awesome, I'm in. We get there, and this is sort of whole process. There's a specific personnel. So the one that I went to was next to Monsanto Park in Lisbon. It's called União Zoófila. I'll drop the link somewhere here, or in the description below as well, if you want to go check them out, volunteer, donate, whatever. Really lovely people who work there. Most of the people are very local Portuguese as well, and they have about 400 dogs, I believe, and they also have cats as well. So I go in, and there is a specific person, I think, in charge of a dog adoption, which is very different to the person who's in charge of sort of the volunteer side of things and the sponsorship side of things. So there's 2 things you can do. Like, you can volunteer, and by volunteering you're kind of there in the shelter with the dogs, like sort of cleaning up their dens, you are feeding them, you are maybe also taking turns walking them, right? But volunteering means that you're there volunteering at the shelter, right? Whereas sponsoring, you can sponsor a dog. And so when you're sponsoring a dog, you could say like, I don't know, like 20 euros a month or something, and that covers the dog's like food and all the things it needs to be at the shelter every month. And consequently then you become that dog sponsor, and every dog can have more than one sponsor. And when you are their sponsor, you can kind of come anytime and take them out for a walk within their opening hours, of course, right? It's not just like anytime, it's not like midnight and you fancy a walk with the dog, no. So they have like specific opening hours, and they already had a few dogs in mind that I think they kind of favorited, and they really wanted them to be loved. And so they showed me like this dog and that one, and you know, this dog's story and how sweet she is, etc. But then, you know, you just have this inkling, this sort of gut feeling. I like just turned around and there she was in this corner, just like almost just like tucked behind this corner you couldn't really see, but you really had to. There was just something that clicked in that moment. I just felt like I was supposed to turn around. I saw her and she was just there looking at me, like wagging her tail, and her eyes were looking at me like, there you are, I've been waiting for you. And I was like quite overwhelmed, but I was like, you know, who's that? Who's the sweet soul? And they said, oh, you know, that's Bomboka, which is her name that they gave her. That's Bomboka. She's 9 years old, they said. I think they said she came from the gypsies or something, right? And yeah, she didn't have a sponsor. No one had thought about adopting her. She'd been there for like 6 months or something already. Hey, boo. She'd been there for 6 months already. And yeah, she was still available. And I said, hey, like, I would very much love to take her out for a walk and just see, you know, if there's anything here. And oh, I loved it. I loved her energy. I loved her personality, her whole character. It felt like I knew her. You know, maybe some of you dog owners have had that feeling as well before, where like a dog chooses you, right? And I just couldn't say no. I was like, I'm sponsoring her for sure, right? So I walked out of there, and then for the next month, I came back for, I think, 2 or 3 times a week. I would come back and then I would walk her. And I would take her to Monsanto, we'd just get to know each other, and I would test her out, like, you know, in parks with other dogs, with children, and I could really see how her personality was and maybe what some of her trauma responses were, let's say, because I know, you know, she's from the shelter, so I was just curious, you know, would she react, would she have any massive like triggers or reactions to cars or buses or, you know, people or men or sticks or anything like that, you know? But my conclusion on that was that she wasn't actually massively traumatized. She was just very hungry. She's like always hungry, and I noticed that from the very get-go. So I assume she went for a long time without food, or she's been starved, because she really goes crazy over food. And even now it's been quite a succession of just training her slowly to leave things alone and not eat everything that's on the street. So from there, I spent about a month walking her every 2-3 times a week. And by the end of that month, I just felt like she belongs. Well, actually, no, this is what it was. Every time I left her there again and I said goodbye to her, my heart just like died a little bit. And I was like, she doesn't belong here. She belongs with me. She belongs in a home. She belongs just like, yeah, she just deserves to be cuddled and have good food and just be loved all the time. Because I mean, look at her. So after about a month, I go up to the person who's like head of adoption, and I was like, hey, I think I want to adopt her. Well, no, I was like, I want to adopt her. It's not like I think, I say, I'm gonna adopt her. And she was like, okay, where you currently live, are you allowed dogs? What happens if you want to go back home wherever you are, because I'm an expat, you know? And they've had obviously some issues with maybe expats coming in, being like, oh, I want a dog, and then they leave again, and the dog ends up back at the shelter. So, you know, very, very normal. The person also had a bit of a, she really liked Mishka, so she was quite, really wanted to make sure that she went to a good home, right? And so there was definitely some extensive questioning, let's say. And yeah, I said that the place that I was currently at doesn't allow dogs, but I'm actually moving to a place that does allow dogs. And it was crazy, because the day that I decided to adopt her, the day that I handed in the form for adoption, that was the day that I found my new apartment that allows dogs. They said yes. I found someone for my then current place, and everything just kind of worked within a 48-hour period. And you know, when just everything aligns, you're like, huh, like you just can't make this shit up, you know? The universe is like so on our side. She brought me so much luck with that apartment, and yeah, and so that was our home. We moved in, and it was actually quite an interesting process because, so we set a day, it was like a Sunday, and she's like, cool, I'll bring her around sometime in the afternoon. She came, and it was actually supposed to be more of like just a tester. So like she'll come around, the dog will spend a few hours with you, and the intention was that she would come back and pick her up. But she ended up getting caught up in some other errands, and she said, well, how is she with you? Is she good? And I said, yeah, she's calmed down a lot. She's like, okay, cool. Do you think she can pass the night there? I was like, yeah, I think she's fine, right? And then she passed the night there, and then she checked in again the next morning. I said, she's fine, like she's really chill now. She's like, okay, cool. A couple more days passed, and she was like, you know, how's she doing? And I said, she's doing even better. And then she just never came back. She just gave me everything. And I think that's, in a way, maybe it's like also intentional on purpose, you know, saying that we'll be back to pick her up, we'll be back to pick her up, just in case that there's anything that's like, you know, not going right, that sort of having that peace of mind that they're going to come and, you know, just like pick them up if need be, right? But if everything goes well, then they're just like, cool, we don't need to pick them up anymore. So that was quite interesting because I wasn't expecting her to like just like come and live with me like from the get-go. But that was also my preferred. That was also obviously like what I wish would happen, and it did. So that was really cool. She did have a fear of cars though, and she would freak out a lot. There were a lot of things that she freaked out about, to be honest, in the beginning, because I was living in, not Santos, but like in Lapa. And there were so many trams, there were buses, there were construction, there was a lot of cars and beeping and people and kids and food and just trash everywhere. And she was just like so stimulated and so overwhelmed. Yeah, I really took about a good month, I think, before she started to like settle down. And so on the admin side of the whole adoption process, it was really just like fill out a form. They come and check out your place. But I think that she came with the dog already to check out the place, and then she just stayed. So it wasn't like a separate visit or something like that. One caveat to that was it did feel a little bit unorganized to me because they're so busy that I think they're a little bit understaffed, and there's just a lot going on, a lot of dogs, a lot of, you know, people, animals needing help. But I felt like had I not followed up many times, Mishka wouldn't be here with me today. So it was really my like resilient, continuous follow-ups that actually finally got me the visit and her to approve Mishka coming to my place. The other thing is then once she's here, I didn't realize this until about 7 months later when I was thinking about going to Spain. Then I was like, okay, we're crossing the border now. Like, does she need anything? I went to the vet and they were like, okay, do you have her vaccine passes and her papers? And I was like, no, should I? And then they're like, is she microchipped? I was like, I think so. But they couldn't find any microchips on her. And so this is the part where I was like, okay, this would have been nice to have had this cleared up at the start, but what you need to do is like once, I think they also wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to give her back, that I was actually like, she was here to stay, because they didn't want to do that admin thing all again. And so once like sort of 7 months had passed and I was like, hey, like I really need her papers, like I'm going across the border, like the vet needs it, I need it, maybe border control needs it, right? And so they're like, okay, cool, can you come? And so I went back to the shelter. They gave her the microchip finally, and then they submitted something on their side which then transferred the ownership of the dog from them to me. And then they gave me her pet, it's not a pet passport, but it's like her vaccine pass, her book of all the vaccines that she's had. And so that was really helpful, right? And I think to cross the border, you should have a passport for the dogs if you're going internationally. But going to Spain, you're fine because no one really checks, to be honest. I didn't get stopped, I didn't check. My intention was there. I went to the vet and I was like, hey, I need a passport, like sort of last minute for my dog. And like, yeah, it's like 50 euros and you know, we can only do an appointment tomorrow. And I was like, I need one like now, I'm leaving in like 2 hours, you know? So I was like, scrap that, I'll just take the risk and I'll just fucking go to Spain. So that's what I did and we didn't get stopped. We had no issues whatsoever. So that was that. I would say all in all, the admin side would have been exactly like making sure adoption papers, there was then microchipping, there is then the transfer of ownership, and then if you're going across borders, then like getting a pet passport. And that is really just it. In terms of like, you know, the adoption costs, there was actually no costs. Like they didn't ask for any money. Of course, like I was sponsoring her and I donated some money for it, but it wasn't like a fixed cost of like $250 or something like that to adopt a dog. Whereas in some countries, like in New Zealand, it is like they do, I think, ask for like $250 or something for a dog, because of the vaccine costs and things like that, right? So it's just kind of like the different way of saying adoption, but it's like of donation, but it's like a fixed fee, whereas like here there is none. So I think it's a good and a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing in the sense that like, because it's, you know, not free, but like free in that sense, that a lot of people just go and adopt dogs and they might not have the financial means to sustain a dog. You just go and take one home, you know, and so you might get some of those people in there. The nice thing is that it does encourage more people who might not have the financial means to fork out, you know, $250, but who have a lot of love to give and would give them, you know, very loving, cozy home and have enough for the dog to give them a chance to be a pet parent. I think that's really beautiful. So yeah, so that's kind of all on the admin side. From then a training perspective, how I managed to get her to calm down a lot more, integrate her into the city, and what I've seen from some of my, well, not friends, but like friends and people around, stories I've heard where they had a really difficult time to integrate the dogs back into the city life. And I think a huge tip I would give people is to really get the time, spend the time to get to know the dog well in different environments before choosing to adopt them. Because if you are adopting a dog that is only ever been out on the farm and you're going to live in a city and it's going to be noises everywhere, like that's going to take years to train out of them, right? Whereas just expose them to different situations, you could see a little bit better, like, oh, this would work, this wouldn't work. And so for me, I went into it knowing that she was already good with children, she's good with other dogs, she's like largely unfazed by most things, and she's just perpetually hungry. I felt like I got to know her quite well, right? And she was scared of cars. And so that was probably the number one thing that we had to work on, because she was like really scared of cars and I couldn't go on any Uber pet rides anywhere because she just like freaked out. And so I had to, that was inconvenient, I'd say, at the start. But then when there were a few days I left her with like a dog daycare, and they would go out on adventures to like Monsanto, and she came back and then suddenly she just loved cars. And I was like, what did you do? She was like, oh, she just saw the other dogs getting in the car, getting in the van, and she just hopped in. And I was like, wow, that's all it takes. So I think if you are struggling to sort of train your dog that you adopted from the shelter, sometimes exposing them to like other dogs that are already trained and, you know, chill and whatnot, that can actually have a massive benefit because they learn a lot from each other, right? And so yeah, that's something that was really cool. And then what do I do when I'm away? Obviously I go on trips from time to time, way less than I used to, but when I do, I try to take her with me as much as I can now. And she's very chill. She's been to Spain, she's been all around Portugal, right? But there are times where I might have to fly and I can't take her with me, then what happens then, right? So like for example, early in the year I went to Switzerland for 2 weeks and I left her with sort of like a pet hotel holiday place out in the countryside, just about an hour outside of Lisbon. She just had the best time of her life. She was like rolling in the mud, playing with the other dogs, eating off leash the entire time. Like the lady was like, she gave me my leash back and she's like, oh, we're not going to be needing this. And I was like, what do you mean you're not going to need this? Like she like will go off on her rendezvous and never to be seen again. And she was like, no, this is very free, safe roaming system. And I was like, cool. And so she had a really, really great time. And I would get video updates from her like every day. And so that was really, really amazing. And I looked forward to those video updates every day. So I'll link them down below. I can't remember what it's called, like Refugio de Caldo or something. So I'll link it down below. Awesome people, really lovely lady, and really, yeah, Mishka came back so happy. That's what I do when I'm away. And then occasionally I'll have some friends who she's familiar with, she knows them, and I'll just get them to like dog day sit her sometimes, or yeah, look after her for a weekend or something, you know? And she's very happy with that. She's a very human dog. She's a very one-to-one as well. She doesn't like to be in a household with like other dogs so much. So that's just, yeah, every dog is different, obviously. Okay, so 2 more things I want to cover, which might be helpful for you to know if you're considering adopting a dog. The first is like, how do I travel with a dog in a city in Lisbon, for example, let's say specifically, right? How do I get around? Public transport, is that okay? Is Uber okay? Cars, etc., right? So for the most part, I don't take her on cars, but whenever I do, I tend to use Uber Pets or Bolt Pets, and you do pay a premium on it. A lot of people are like, I didn't even know that was an option. I was like, when you become a dog mom, many things. You're just like, oh, I didn't know this existed and this existed and this existed, right? So Bolt Pet, Uber Pet is a thing. And so yeah, you just pay a small premium on that and that's fine. Other things like buses, I think I've never taken her on a bus because I'm not a fan of buses myself. I can't say anything about that. In terms of metro, I've had people take her on the metro and that's been fine. I've also taken her on the train from like Lisbon to Cascais and back, and so trains are fine as well, not a problem. You don't need to buy an extra ticket or anything like that. They do have to be like on the leash just in case a ticket man walks by. Like sure, if they're like really well behaved, then you're fine, but generally speaking, it's like they should be muzzled and they should be on a leash. But I don't have a muzzle for her and it's been fine. And the other train, so there's 2 different types of trains. And I didn't know this. So the train that you go from like Lisbon to Cascais, which is more of a regional train, is fine. But then you've got the trains that go from like Lisbon down to Algarve or down to Faro. And I took that once because I was meeting up with some friends down in the Algarve. And I just got 1 ticket for myself. And then the ticket man comes and he's like, oh, actually, she needs a ticket. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I searched it online and I thought I saw that dogs don't need a ticket. And I don't know if he was like having me on or not. And to this day, I still don't know. But apparently I needed to buy another sort of like adult ticket for my dog. And I was like, you sure, man? And at the time, I think I didn't have, it was like something wrong with the connection. He couldn't I didn't have cash on me. I think that's right. And he's like, oh, I can't do the ticket thing because there's no reception here. I'll come back later. And then he just never came back. So I was like, oh, maybe he was just like having me on, you know? So anyway, we don't know, but just like to be wary of if you're doing like longer distance trains that they might charge you for that. I think that, and then by traveling, if you're in your car and you're going across like borders, I have some friends who've traveled across borders and it's been fine. So no worries about that. In terms of like flying, I've not yet taken her on a plane. I hope I don't ever have to, because I could imagine that to be quite an ordeal. So I probably won't and don't plan to take her on any flights unless, you know, pet friendly planes happens to be a thing and it's like you pay a small premium to have them sit next to you or something, that would be epic. But at the moment I only know of private jets, so if anyone knows, drop it down below. I would love to know if there's like any pet-friendly carriers that don't put a medium dog with the cargo, because she is a big dog. She's like 20-25 kgs, and so she's too large to just like put in a bag and sit next to you. She'd definitely have to go in a cargo. I mean, how epic would that be to like travel the world with the dog, huh? Right. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on was how she's changed my life since I've gotten her. And gosh, she's changed my life in so many ways. What a special soul. I think the biggest shift for me since I got her is that she's really grounded me. She's given me sort of routine and stability here. She's actually freed me by stripping away the freedom, which is ironic, to travel and be anywhere at any time that I want to. I can't anymore. I'm actually very much like committed to being here, committed and responsible for her, to look after her, to make sure, you know, she gets fed and that she gets her walks and all these things. And in doing so, like, yes, it strips me of my freedom to be in multiple countries and to jet around like I used to for the last 9 years. But it's interesting because there's actually freedom in that freedom being taken away. And it's not that, like, and I knew that it was a very conscious decision. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna adopt a dog and still think that I'm gonna have my nomadic lifestyle. I was like, no, it's like I knew, I made a very conscious decision that if I was to adopt her, I am saying no to my nomadic lifestyle. I'm like, this chapter's come to an end. Like, am I ready for that? Am I ready to close that chapter and open up a new one? Am I willing to give that up consciously for something else that might be more challenging because it's responsibility, right? And it was quite scary at the time. I remember my stepdad saying to me, it's like, oh, Emily, you know, piénsalo. He said to me in Spanish, like, think well on it, because, you know, a dog is a lot of responsibility and, you know, you travel a lot. And I was like, yes, I'm very fleeting, and I struggled to take care of myself. Let's be honest. I was like, wow, being an adult's hard. You know, you've got you washing, food, cooking, cleaning, and then you've got your business and you've got, you know, social commitments and all these other things on the side. You're like, oh my goodness, like, you know, how do I fit in a dog? And I always had this internal dialogue that I'm very scatty and very messy. I can't look after more than myself. Like, I struggle to look after myself, let's be honest. Like, how could I look after another creature, another being? And what was really beautiful about actually adopting Mishka and just she kind of taught me that I am capable of looking after myself, of both of us, and taking care of us. And in a way, it kind of feels like a child. She kind of basically is. She's dependent on me, you know, and inspired me and motivated me to step up. And so I would say that's been the biggest shift for me, is realizing that I can look after more than just myself. I can be organized, I can have a routine, and I can also really love a routine. Like, I love our routines now. Like, we wake up, we go to the cafe, we say hi to all the neighbors and the dogs who come and mingle and say good morning. I love our walks. I love that when I'm working from home, she just like lies next to me here. It's so wonderful to just get to spend so much time with her and love it. And it's something that I would never give up, trade for, right? I don't care how many other countries I could have been to in these 10 months since I've adopted her. It's like none of it even comes close to the sort of internal reward I've gotten from just being with her. And yeah, so that's really interesting, because I used to think, you know, my goal was to travel to as many countries as I can and do, see, be everywhere as much as I can, right? Because I always felt like I would never get that freedom again or something. Everything felt so scarce, and since having her, I'm like, oh no, like everything is so abundant. I have so much time. I can do all these trips if I want to, but I prefer to be here with her. And it blows my mind. It's maybe I'm just shifting into a different phase, right? Yeah, so that's the biggest shift for me. And then in terms of my business as well, which was really surprising because I've always had quite a volatile business model, let's say. Projects are like one-off, they're like high highs, low lows, really, really good phases, months where I'm just like growing like crazy. And then there'll be moments of like dry spells that kind of drive you insane and freak you out and just rattle your nervous system. And what's been really interesting since I've adopted her and become more grounded, stable, consistent, I've seen a shift in my business, like becoming also more stable over time. And it's like the decisions that you make. It's like business is really just a reflection of you. Because yeah, like for the longest time I was like, oh, why can't I just have a consistent business? Like why can't I just like have high recurring MRR, like monthly recurring revenue months, like other people, you know, who just seem to have a really stable business, and why is mine like so fucking volatile? And it's this voice like came to me in my meditation and was like, well, it's not just like doing more, it's like you have to be a more stable person. It like starts with you. And I was like, that makes sense. Right? I looked back on it and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so true. Like in my early 20s, I was highly unstable, highly volatile, fleeting, all these places, and my business reflected exactly that. And now that I'm shifting into a more just settled-ish lifestyle I find that I'm making decisions in my business that gives me more peace of mind rather than chasing the high dopamine hits of like high highs, massive projects and things like that, right? So that's been really interesting. So it's not necessarily that my business has like grown crazy since I've gotten her, but it's become more stable and it's allowed me so much more peace of mind. I remember this time last year, I was working so many hours. I was like stressed as fuck. I was managing like so many people, like 7 people, and I just like was so frazzled and I didn't feel like I had enough time to do anything. And yet the take-home pay also I probably take home more now than I did last year. But I was just like, we were making more last year, but like you make high revs, you have people on your team, you've got overheads, like you don't actually make that much at the end of the day. And now it's like, I've stripped it all back. I've got a way more lean business. I want to be lean. I want to have peace of mind. I want to build like stable, reliable, monthly recurring revenue in my business. And like, I'm not available for like headaches or projects that would really frazzle my nervous system. Like I don't want that anymore. And it's so fascinating because it is quite a reflection of my life right now. It's like I'm just in a very peaceful phase of my life and I don't take it for granted. Like I've never had this peace in my life before. I've always felt like I've been on the run, going, never stopping, never pausing, never resting really fully. And I think now I feel really, really grateful to be in this place. And I really think that adopting Mishka had a lot to do with that. She's taught me so much about patience and love, unconditional love, accepting myself. Sometimes I question this, and this is the last thing I'll share and then I'm gonna round this off. But sometimes I look at her and I'm just like, you deserve the world, my love. You deserve all the cuddles, you deserve all the food, you deserve all the love, because like, and then I was like, well, why? She doesn't do anything except for just being her. You know, it's not like she makes money or works or does anything. She doesn't like chase after sheep and round sheep like a farm dog. She just exists. She's just her. She's just cute and fluffy and she is a cheeky little shit sometimes and goes on her rendezvous. And I was like, and yet despite that, even when she does piss me off, infuriate me, infuriate other people, like despite that, she's still so worthy of love and of being safe, right? And I was like, oh wow, I struggle to extend myself the same. And so it was really through loving her, right, unconditionally, that I also really learned to love and accept myself and be like, oh Emily, you know, we also deserve to just feel safe for no other reason other than we just exist, right? We also deserve to feel loved and to love ourselves and to nourish ourselves and to feel good and not feel guilty that we have a safe home, right? It's like, how come she gets to have a safe home and some of the other dogs don't? They're still in the shelter, they're still, you know, out there being abandoned, or, you know, it's like, no one really deserves that, but everybody deserves to have, I think, a safe home and to be loved for no other reason other than they just exist. And I think I've often felt like guilty of having this freedom, guilty of having this peace and other people don't, guilty of having, you know, amazing friends and amazing life here in Lisbon and other people don't. And I think I've gotten to the point where I just accept that, and I'm super grateful for it. And I feel deserving of it for no other reason other than just like, I exist, I'm here, I receive, I allow, and that is all. That is okay, right? Those are my takeaways from these beautiful 10 months of this beautiful, fluffy munchkin. Hi baby. We are gonna round off, go for a sunset walkie, nah, booby. And then we'll go have some dinner. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. It was a bit lengthier than I was expecting. But if you have any other questions, drop them in the comments below. I love hearing from you. Thank you for your love and support. And if you want to see more of Mishka, please hit that subscribe button. It helps me a lot. And looking forward to just sharing more life lessons, business lessons, life musings from my life to yours. And we wish you a really lovely, beautiful day. Ciao. See you in the next one.